Hi, I'm Mark Bierke, and welcome to Tabula, where you can find simple lessons for the home cook. Today's cooking tip video is actually just a myth about coffee that I wanted to bust. So I had heard it said that dark roast coffee has more caffeine than light roast, and that intuitively makes sense. You taste the coffee and it's stronger and more robust, so obviously it has more caffeine. But then I heard that myth was debunked, and it turns out that lighter roast coffee has more caffeine than darker roast. And the idea here is that the longer the beans are exposed to heat, the more caffeine is driven off by that process. And so the lighter roast beans, which have spent less time in heat, have more caffeine left in them. And that makes sense. And I've had lighter roast coffee and felt a little bit more of a jolt from it, felt a little more alert and awake after having drunk it. And it turns out that neither of these things is actually true. And so I was like, okay, is this just a placebo with the light roast coffee? Let's talk about what's actually happening here. The longer a bean is exposed to heat, the darker it gets, of course. But also, water is evaporated off of the beans, so they get lighter. And they start to puff up slightly. Think about popcorn, but not fully popped. So the beans are larger and lighter on the dark roast coffee. So if you take the exact same measuring scoop and measure out a dark and a light roast at the same time, what you'll have is actually a lot more beans that can fit into the light roast because they're smaller and they're more dense. So it's going to be a lot more coffee by weight in that one compared to the dark roast coffee. And I'll do an experiment. We'll check it out right now. Okay, let's start out with a visual comparison here. So on the left I have the dark roast, and on the right I have the light roast. The dark roast beans are actually larger. We can see that actually, and they're a little bit shinier and look a little more oily. And then the ones on the right are much smaller, and they have a lighter color, of course, but they're looking drier and less shiny. Okay, now for our simple test, I'm going to take one level scoop of each of the coffees and weigh them and see how much they actually weigh. Here's the perfectly level scoop of the dark roast. And that's 74 grams. And here's the light roast. And that weighs, 92. That's a significant amount more. Let's do the math and check out how much more that is. We'll take the difference between 92 and 74, and that tells us that there's 18 grams more coffee in the light roast in that exact same scoop. And then we'll divide that by 74 grams, which was the amount of coffee in the dark roast. And that'll tell us what percentage more coffee there is here in the light roast. 24, so that's almost 25% more coffee actually fits into that same scoop if you use light roast coffee. So today's simple tip is if you want more caffeine, use the exact same scoop and use light roast. And if you want it to all be equal, actually weigh out your coffee rather than using volume as your measurement.